Rain hammered against the asphalt of the Philadelphia docks, washing away the blood of a deal gone wrong. But it couldn't wash away the target painted on Silas Vane's back. He was the most feared man on the East Coast, a ghost in a bespoke suit, untouchable and unkillable. Or so he thought. He had his hand on the door handle of his armored SUV when a tiny, trembling voice sliced through the thunder. "Mister, you shouldn't get in." Silas froze, his hand drifting to the Sig Sauer at his hip. He looked down to see a 6-year-old girl in a yellow raincoat, pointing a shaking finger at the undercarriage. "It's ticking," she whispered. That warning didn't just save his life, it ended the man he used to be, and started a war that would burn the city to the ground. This is the story of how a monster fell in love with the only two people who could destroy him. Silas Vane did not like surprises. In his line of work, running the logistics and enforcement for the sprawling Rossi crime syndicate, surprises usually came in the form of federal indictments or hollow-point bullets. He was a man of routine, precision, and icy detachment. At 34, Silas had eyes the color of flint and a reputation that made grown men stutter. They called him the Viper because he struck before you even knew you were in the grass with him. It was a Tuesday evening in November, the kind of night where the cold seeps into your bones and stays there. Silas had just finished a negotiation with a rival faction from New York at a derelict warehouse in South Philly. The meeting had been tense, but bloodless. He adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal suit, stepped out of the rusted corrugated doors, and walked toward his black Range Rover Sentinel. The parking lot was empty, save for the flickering of a dying street lamp and the relentless downpour. He deactivated the alarm. The chirping sound echoed in the empty lot. He reached for the handle. "Mister!" The voice was so small, so out of place in this industrial wasteland, that Silas almost didn't register it. His instincts, honed by years of urban warfare, took over. He spun around, his coat flaring, his right hand gripping the pistol holstered at his waist. He expected a hitman. He expected a desperate junkie. He did not expect a child. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She was drowning in a yellow plastic raincoat that was 2 sizes too big, clutching a muddy stuffed rabbit by its ear. Her hair was plastered to her forehead, and her large, hazel eyes were wide with terror. But she wasn't looking at his gun. She was looking at his car. Silas didn't lower his guard. Children were rarely alone here. Where there was a child, there was usually a parent. And in this neighborhood, parents were often desperate or dangerous. He scanned the perimeter shadows, alleyways, rooftops. Nothing. "Get out of here, kid," Silas rasped, his voice like gravel. "It's not safe." The girl didn't move. She took a step closer, her cheap sneakers squelching in the oil-stained puddles. "You can't go," she said, her voice trembling but insistent. "Why?" Silas demanded, his patience thinning. "There's something under your car," she whispered. "I heard it. When the man with the scar put it there. It goes tick, tick, tick." The blood in Silas's veins turned to ice. He looked at the girl, really looked at her, searching for deceit. He saw only fear and a strange, stubborn bravery. Slowly, keeping one eye on the girl and one on the surroundings. Silas backed away from the vehicle. He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed Dante Moretti, his second in command. "Don't start the engine," Silas said into the phone, his eyes never leaving the SUV. "Get the bomb squad, now, and bring the perimeter team. I'm at the dockside warehouse." "Boss," Dante's voice was sharp with alarm. "We cleared that vehicle an hour ago." then someone missed something, or someone on the inside is getting sloppy. Just get here. Silas hung up. He looked at the girl. Come here, he commanded, gesturing to the concrete barrier behind a stack of shipping containers, away from the blast radius. She hesitated, hugging the rabbit tighter. If that car explodes, Silas said, trying to soften his tone but failing. You don't want to be standing there. Move. She scampered over to him. Silas knelt behind the barrier, shielding the girl with his body, though he loathed the proximity. He checked his watch. 2 minutes passed. Then, it happened. He hadn't touched the car. He hadn't started the ignition, but whoever had planted the device must have been watching. Or perhaps it was on a timer that had just run out. A deafening roar shattered to the night. The shockwave punched the air from Silas's lungs. He curled around the girl, pressing her head into his chest as debris rained down shards of glass, twisted metal, and flaming rubber. The heat was intense, singing the back of his expensive coat. The Range Rover was gone, replaced by a twisted skeleton of burning steel. If he had opened that door, if he had been 3 seconds faster. Silence returned, ringing in his ears, broken only by the crackle of flames and the distant wail of sirens. Silas looked down. The girl was shaking violently, her face buried in his shirt. She smelled of rain and strawberry shampoo, a scent so innocent it made his stomach turn. He pulled back slightly. You okay? She nodded, tears streaming down her face, leaving clean tracks through the grime. Is the bad man gone? Which bad man? Silas asked, his mind racing. The one with the scar. Yes. She sniffled. He had a white line right here. She traced a line through her eyebrow. Silas felt a jolt of recognition. A scar through the eyebrow. That sounded like Kalin the Butcher. Reed, a freelance enforcer who supposedly worked for the Chicago outfit. But Reed was in prison, or at least, that was the intel Silas had been sold. Before he could ask more, the screech of tires announced the arrival of his team. 3 black SUVs skidded into the lot. Dante Moretti jumped out of the lead car, an MP5 submachine gun in his hands, flanked by 6 armed guards. Silas, my! Dante yelled, scanning the burning wreckage with wide eyes. Jesus Christ! Silas stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. He dusted the ash off his shoulders. Secure the area. No police. We handle this in-house. Dante nodded, barking orders. Then, he noticed the child. Boss, who is this? Silas looked down at the little girl in the yellow raincoat. She looked tiny next to the armed men, terrified out of her mind. He realized then that he didn't even know her name. But he knew one thing: she had seen the bomber. She was the only witness, and in his world, witnesses were loose ends. But she had also just saved his life. I don't know, Silas said quietly. He looked at the girl. What's your name? Lily, she whispered. Where are your parents? Lily. Mommy is at work. She told me to wait in the back room. But I saw a kitty. I followed it outside. Where does Mommy work? Lily pointed a trembling finger toward the dilapidated diner, visible across the street. A flickering neon sign reading, The Greasy Spoon. Silas looked at Dante. Clean this up. Find out how a bomb gets on my car when I have 3 guys on surveillance. I want names. Dante. Tonight. And the girl? Dante asked, his voice low. Silas looked at Lily. He should hand her over to social services. He should give her $100 and send her running. But the image of the burning car was seared into his retinas, and the description of the man with the scar. "I'm taking her back to her mother," Silas said. "And then I'm going to find out who hired a dead man to kill me." The bell above the door of the Greasy Spoon jingled as Silas walked in, the girl's small hand engulfed in his large, gloved one. The diner was a relic of the 50s, smelling of stale coffee, pine cleaner, and despair. It was empty, except for an old man sleeping in a booth and a woman behind the counter, scrubbing a stain with aggressive desperation. She looked up as the door opened, a customer service smile plastered on her face, but it vanished the moment she saw Lily. "Lily." The woman vaulted over the counter, ignoring the staff-only gate. She was on her knees in seconds, grabbing the girl and checking her over frantically. "Oh my God, I was looking everywhere for you. I told you to stay in the break room. Where were you? You're soaking wet." "I'm sorry. Mommy," Lily sobbed, burying her face in the woman's apron. There was a loud noise, and fire. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto Silas for the first time. Silas felt the air leave the room. She was beautiful, but not in the polished, plastic way of the women Silas usually associated with. She was raw. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, escaping tendrils framing a face that was pale with exhaustion. Her eyes were a piercing blue, sharp with intelligence and protective fury. She wore a stained pink uniform that had seen better days, and her name tag read Caitlin. "Who are you?" Caitlin demanded, standing up and pulling Lily behind her legs. Her posture was defensive, a lioness shielding her cub. She looked at Silas's expensive suit, the wet ash on his coat, the way he occupied the space with predatory confidence. She knew instantly he wasn't a cop, and he wasn't a customer. "My name is Silas," he said, keeping his hands visible. "Your daughter wandered into the parking lot across the street." "The warehouse lot?" Caitlin's eyes widened. "That place is condemned. It was active tonight," Silas said cryptically. "There was an accident, a car fire. Lily saw it happen. She was close." Caitlin gasped, turning back to Lily. "Are you hurt? Did you get burned?" "He saved me. Mommy," Lily said, peeking out from behind Caitlin's legs. "He hid me behind the blocks, and I told him about the ticking." Caitlin looked back at Silas, confusion warring with fear. "Ticking?" Silas stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ms. Rossi," he guessed, noting the Italian surname on a certificate framed on the wall behind the register. "Employee of the month, Caitlin Rossi." "I need to speak with you, privately. It concerns your daughter's safety." Caitlin hesitated. Every instinct in her screamed that this man was dangerous. He carried the scent of violence the way other men carried cologne. But he had brought Lily back. "I get off in 10 minutes, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. "But I'm not going anywhere with you. We can talk here." Silas nodded. "Here is fine." He sat in the booth furthest from the window. Old habits died hard. He ordered a black coffee he didn't intend to drink. He watched Caitlin as she finished closing up. She moved with efficiency, but he noticed the holes in her sneakers, the way she counted the tips in the jar with a subtle sigh. She was struggling. When she finally sat across from him, Lily was coloring in a booth nearby, within eyesight but out of earshot. "Talk," Caitlin said, crossing her arms. "Your daughter saw a man plant a bomb on my car tonight," Silas said bluntly. He didn't believe in sugarcoating. She described him. Scar through the eyebrow. Caitlin's face went pale. "A bomb, who are you? Exactly." "I'm a businessman with competitors who lack ethics." Silas lied smoothly. "The important thing is that Lily saw his face. If this man finds out there was a witness..." Are you threatening us? Caitlin hissed, leaning forward. I'm warning you, Silas corrected, his gaze intense. The police can't help with this. The man she described, he's a ghost. If he knows she saw him, he will come back to clean up loose ends. Caitlin ran a hand through her hair, her breath hitching. Why are you telling me this? Why not just disappear? Because I owe her, Silas said. The words tasted strange in his mouth. He never owed anyone. If she hadn't warned me, I'd be dead. I pay my debts. Caitlin. He pulled a heavy envelope from his inside pocket and slid it across the table. What is this? She asked. $10,000. Cash. Untraceable. Caitlin stared at the envelope as if it were a poisonous snake. I don't want your money. It's not charity. It's a relocation fund. Take the girl. Leave Philly. Go to your mother's. Go to a friend's. Just get out of the city for a few weeks until I handle this. Caitlin laughed. A dry, bitter sound. You think I can just leave? I have rent due tomorrow. I have no car. My mother is dead. We have nowhere to go. Mr. Silas, this job is the only thing keeping us off the street. Silas studied her. He saw the pride, the exhaustion, and the terrifying vulnerability of her situation. She was trapped, and because of him, she was now in danger. He made a decision then, a stupid, reckless decision that went against every rule in the syndicate handbook. Then I'm not leaving, Silas said. Caitlin blinked. Excuse me, if you can't leave, then I have to stay close enough to ensure you're safe until I find this man. You are absolutely not staying near us, Caitlin snapped. I don't know you. You're clearly mob or something worse. I am the only thing standing between you and the man with the scar, Silas said softly. Look, I have a security team. I can place a detail outside your apartment. No men with guns outside my house, she interrupted. Lily has nightmares enough as it is. Silas paused. He looked at Lily, who was humming to herself, oblivious to the fact that she was the center of a potential gang war. Fine, Silas said. No guards. Just me. I need a place to lay low anyway. My enemies think I'm dead. I need to keep it that way for a few days while I hunt them. I'll rent the empty apartment in your building. I saw the "for rent" sign in the window upstairs when I parked. You want to be my neighbor? Caitlin looked at him like he was insane. I want to keep you alive, Silas said. Standing up, he placed a business card on the table. It had no name, just a number. I'll be in the apartment above yours by morning. Lock your doors, Caitlin, and don't let Lily out of your sight. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Thank you, he said, without looking back, for raising a kid who notices things. As Silas walked out into the rain, pulling his collar up, he dialed Dante again. Boss, I'm alive, Silas said. Don't tell anyone, not even the capos. As far as the city knows, Silas Vane died in that explosion. Where are you going? I'm going undercover, Silas said, looking up at the dim light of the apartment above the diner. Run a background check on Caitlin Rossi. I want to know everything. Who she is, where she came from, and who the father of that girl is. On it. Boss, that scar description the kid gave, I ran it. And it matches a guy named Kalen Reed. But here's the kicker. Silas. Reed was on the payroll. Your payroll. He was supposed to be guarding the warehouse tonight. Silas griped the phone until the plastic creaked. The betrayal wasn't from a rival. It was from inside the house. Find him, Silas whispered, but don't kill him. I want to do that myself. The apartment above the Greasy Spoon smelled of boiled cabbage and damp plaster. It was a far cry from the penthouse overlooking Rittenhouse Square that Silas Vane usually called home. There was no Italian marble here, no climate-controlled wine cellar, and certainly no biometric security system. Just a rusted deadbolt, a leaking faucet that dripped with the rhythm of a ticking clock, and a window that rattled every time the elevated train screamed past 3 blocks away. Silas didn't mind. Luxury made a man soft. Discomfort kept him sharp. He spent the first hour sweeping the place for bugs, listening devices, not insects, though he found plenty of those too. Once he was satisfied the 600-square-foot box was secure, he set up his own perimeter. He taped a small, high-definition camera to the corner of the window frame, angled down at the diner's entrance. He placed motion sensors on the fire escape. Finally, he sat on the lumpy mattress in the corner, his back to the wall, his Sig Sauer P226 stripped down on a towel in front of him. He cleaned the weapon methodically. Slide. Spring. Barrel. His mind, however, wasn't on the gun. It was on the girl downstairs. Lily, it goes tick, tick, tick. That sound played on a loop in his head. The innocence of her warning contrasted violently with the carnage that had followed. He had seen men scream for their mothers in their final moments, but he had never seen a child look a reaper in the eye and tell him to step aside. His burner phone buzzed against the floorboards. 1 vibration, then silence, then 2 vibrations. Silas picked it up. Speak. It's messy. Silas. Dante Moretti's voice crackled through the encrypted line. We found Kalen Reed's apartment in Fishtown. Tossed. Looks like he left in a hurry. But we found something else. What? A burner phone he left behind in the toilet tank. The idiot thought the water would kill the SIM card. It didn't. We pulled the last received text. It was sent 10 minutes before your car went up. Silas reassembled the pistol with a sharp clack. Read it. It says, payment confirmed. The Vane problem ends tonight. Do not fail, or you join him. Sender, unknown number, but the area code. It's local. And Silas, the geolocation of the sender pings from a tower in West Philly. That's syndicate territory, our territory. Silas stared at the water stain on the ceiling. So it is an inside job. Someone high up wants me gone. Who has the authority to authorize a hit on a capo? Only 3 people, Dante said, his voice dropping to a hush. Don Lucian Rossi, his son, Santino, and the consigliere, Arthur Penhaligon. Silas felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Lucian Rossi was the man who had pulled Silas out of the gutter 20 years ago, and made him a king. Santino was a hothead, jealous and reckless. But he was family. And Arthur was the grandfather Silas never had. Dig deeper on the number, Silas ordered. And Dante. That background check on the waitress. Do you have it? There was a long pause on the other end. Dante. Yeah. Boss, I have it. You might want to sit down for this. I'm sitting. Caitlin Rossi, born Caitlin Maria Rossi, 28 years old. Mother was Elena Rossi, deceased. Father listed as unknown on the birth certificate. But I ran a DNA cross-match on a hair sample you snagged from the girl's jacket when you saved her. Silas hadn't snagged a hair sample intentionally, but some strands had been caught on his buttons. He had given them to Dante almost as an afterthought. Spit it out. The kid, Lily. She shares 25% genetic markers with Santino Rossi, which means Caitlin isn't just a random waitress with the same last name. She's Lucian Rossi's daughter, the one who ran away 10 years ago. The one everyone said died of an overdose in Jersey. Silas closed his eyes. The room seemed to shrink. He wasn't just hiding out above a witness. He was guarding the estranged daughter and granddaughter of the very man who might have just ordered his death, if Lucian knew they were alive. Were they leverage, or were they targets, too? "Does Lucian know?" Silas asked. "If he thinks she's dead, he doesn't know she's here. But if he finds out Silas, Santino has been trying to secure the succession for years. If a legitimate heir or her child suddenly appears, they become a threat." Silas finished. "You need to get out of there, boss. If the hit came from the family, and you're found with the lost princess, it's going to look like you kidnapped them to stage a coup." "I can't leave them," Silas said, his voice hard. Kalen Reed saw the girl. If Reed is still out there, he knows a witness exists. He'll come back to finish the job, and he won't care who she's related to. "You're walking a razor's edge, man. I live on the edge. Dante, keep the perimeter tight. If anyone approaches this building who isn't a customer, I want to know." Silas hung up. He stood and walked to the window, peering through the blinds. Down below, the lights of the greasy spoon flickered. He could see Caitlin wiping down tables, her posture slumped with exhaustion. Lily was sitting on a stool, swinging her legs, drawing on a placemat. They were royalty in the underworld, living on scraps. And they had no idea that the monster sleeping upstairs was the right hand of the devil they had escaped. A knock at his door made him freeze. It was soft, tentative. Silas moved silently to the door, checking the peephole. It was Caitlin. She was holding a plastic container. He unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door a crack. "I brought you some leftovers," she said. Not meeting his eyes, she looked smaller without the diner counter between them. She wore a faded grey hoodie now, her hair loose. "It's meatloaf. It's not great, but it's hot." Silas looked at the container, then at her. "Why?" "Because you gave me $10,000 and saved my daughter's life," she said. Finally looking up, her blue eyes were fierce, defenseless, and terrifyingly familiar. They were Lucian's eyes. "And because I heard you walking around up here, the floorboards are thin. I figured you didn't have any food." Silas opened the door wider. "Come in." She hesitated, then stepped into the sparse apartment. She looked around at the lack of furniture, the stripped gun on the towel which he hadn't had time to hide, and the high-tech surveillance gear by the window. "You're not a businessman," she said flatly. "No." "Are you a cop?" "No." "Then what are you?" "I'm the guy who keeps the bad men away," Silas said. He took the container from her. "Thank you." "Lily won't sleep," Caitlin said, her voice trembling slightly. "She keeps asking if the ticking is gone. She's scared of the dark now." Silas set the food down. He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a small, heavy object. It was a tactical flashlight, military grade. "Give her this," Silas said. "Tell her it's a monster hunter light. It's brighter than the sun. Nothing can hide from it." Caitlin took the flashlight. Her fingers brushed his. Her skin was rough from work. His was callous from violence. "Who is Kalen Reed?" she asked. "A mistake," Silas said. "One I intend to correct." "Is he coming here?" "Not tonight. I'm watching." Caitlin studied him for a long moment. "You have a name?" "Silas." "A last name?" "Just Silas." "Well, just Silas," she said, moving to the door. "If you bring trouble to my door, I will kill you myself. I don't care how big your gun is." Silas almost smiled. It was the most Rossi thing she had said yet. "I believe you," he said. She left, closing the door softly. Silas locked it. He didn't eat the meatloaf. He sat by the window and watched the street, the weight of his secrets pressing down on him like the leaden sky over Philadelphia. He was the viper, the enforcer, the killer. But for the first time in his life, he felt like a guardian dog, sitting at the gates of a kingdom he wasn't allowed to enter. He didn't sleep that night. He watched the shadows, and around 3 a.m., the shadows moved. A black sedan rolled slowly down the street, its headlights off. It slowed as it passed the diner. Silas raised a pair of thermal binoculars, 2 heat signatures inside. The passenger was on a phone. They didn't stop. They just looked. Silas wrote down the license plate. He texted it to Dante. Find them. The game had begun, and Silas Vane was playing against his own family. The next morning, the sun rose over Philadelphia with a deceptive brightness, casting long, sharp shadows across the cracked pavement of 4th Street. To the casual observer, it was just another Wednesday. To Silas Vane, it was day 1 of a siege. He had spent the morning monitoring the police scanners. The explosion at the warehouse had been ruled a gas leak, thanks to some influential friends in the fire department, keeping the feds out of it for now. But the underworld was buzzing. The rumor mill was churning out stories. Silas Vane was dead. Silas Vane had faked his death. Silas Vane was in Miami. Nobody knew he was drinking bad coffee at a corner table in the Greasy Spoon, reading a newspaper he'd already memorized. He wore jeans and a black hoodie, civilian clothes that felt like a costume. He sat with his back to the wall, his eyes scanning every person who walked past the large plate-glass window. Caitlin was working the breakfast rush. It wasn't much of a rush, 3 truck drivers, a hungover college student, and the regular old man, Mr. Henderson. Lily was in her usual spot, a booth near the kitchen door, wrestling with a bowl of oatmeal. She had the tactical flashlight Silas had given her sitting right next to her spoon, like a talisman. Every time the door chimed, Silas's hand drifted toward his waist beneath the table. Around 10 a.m., the atmosphere shifted. The door didn't just open, it was shoved. 2 men walked in. They didn't look like customers. They wore leather jackets that were too tight, heavy boots, and expressions that screamed local muscle. Silas recognized the type, immediately low-level bottom feeders, probably working for the South Philly loan sharks who picked at the scraps the big syndicates left behind. They didn't sit down. They walked straight to the counter. Caitlin stiffened. She put down the coffee pot and wiped her hands on her apron. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "Just checking in, darling," the taller one said. He had a neck tattoo of a scorpion and teeth that looked like they'd been rearranged a few times. "Boss says you're late." Late, Caitlin's voice was steady, but Silas saw her knuckles turn white as she gripped the counter. "I paid the rent on Monday. I have the receipt." "Not the rent, sweetheart," the second man sneered. He was shorter, wider, like a fire hydrant with a bad attitude. He picked up a sugar dispenser and let it drop to the floor. It shattered. "The insurance, neighborhood safety tax, prices went up." "I don't have any extra money," Caitlin said, her voice rising. "I barely make enough to keep the lights on. Please, leave." "We can't do that," Scorpion Neck said, leaning over the counter, invading her space. "If you can't pay, maybe we take it out in trade, or maybe—" He turned and looked at Lily. Silas saw red. It wasn't the calculated, cold anger he used in business meetings. This was primal. It was a roar in his blood that drowned out the hum of the refrigerator. Scorpion Neck took a step toward the booth where Lily was sitting. Lily grabbed her flashlight, her eyes wide. "Hey, kid," the thug said, grinning. Nice toy. The chair scraped loudly against the linoleum as Silas stood up. The sound was sharp enough to make both men turn. They looked at the guy in the hoodie in the corner, unimpressed. Sit down, pal, the fire hydrant said. This is private business. Silas didn't speak. He walked toward them. He didn't rush. He moved with a terrifying, fluid grace, his steps silent. I said sit down, the short one barked, reaching into his jacket. He never got his hand out. Silas closed the distance in 2 strides. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it with a sickening snap, and drove his knee into the man's solar plexus. The thug folded like a lawn chair, wheezing, breathless. Scorpion Neck roared and swung a heavy fist. Silas ducked under the haymaker effortlessly. He grabbed the man's head, slamming it down onto the laminate countertop. The impact shook the napkin holders. Silas didn't stop there. He spun the man around, kicking the back of his knee to force him down, and pressed the barrel of his hidden pistol into the base of the man's skull. He didn't draw it fully, just enough for the man to feel the cold steel through the fabric of the hoodie. "Get out!" Silas whispered. His voice was so low it was almost a caress, but it carried the weight of a tombstone. "If I ever see you on this street again, not just in this diner, but on this street, I will peel that tattoo off your neck." He shoved the man forward. "Go!" Scorpion Neck scrambled up, dragging his gasping partner. They stumbled out the door, terrified, crashing into the doorframe in their haste to escape the demon in the black hoodie. Silence descended on the diner. The truck drivers were staring into their eggs. "Mr." Henderson was still asleep. Silas turned to Caitlin. He expected gratitude. What he saw was horror. She was looking at him like he was the one who had just threatened her. She had seen the move, the efficiency, the brutality. She knew what that meant. "You're not just a guy with a gun," she whispered. "You're one of them." "I handled it," Silas said, his adrenaline fading, replaced by a dull ache in his ribs where he'd been thrown against the car the night before. "You handled it." Caitlin walked around the counter, furious. "Do you know who they work for? That was the Vipers. Not the big guys, but the street crew. They'll be back with 10 more men." The irony almost made Silas laugh. The Vipers. They called themselves that in honor of him. Silas the Viper Vane. He was being threatened by his own fan club. "They won't be back," Silas said. "Trust me." "Why?" "Because you scared them." Caitlin gestured to Lily, who was watching Silas with wide, awestruck eyes. "You did that in front of my daughter." Silas looked at Lily. "Are you okay?" "Lily." Lily nodded. She held up the flashlight. "You were fast, like a ninja." "Go to the back." "Lily," Caitlin ordered, her voice shaking. Lily scampered off. Caitlin turned on Silas, closing the distance, poking a finger into his chest. "I want you to leave. Now. Take your money, take your gun, and get out of my life. We were struggling before, but we were safe. Now we're in the middle of whatever war you brought with you." "You were never safe," Silas snapped, losing his cool. "You think those thugs would have stopped at the sugar jar? They would have bled you dry and then burned this place down for the insurance money. That's how the ecosystem works. Caitlin, you're the gazelle. I'm the only lion willing to kill the hyenas." "I don't want a lion," she shouted. "I want a normal life." "You don't get a normal life," Silas shouted back. The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. "Not with who you are." Caitlin froze. Her eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" Silas cursed internally. He had slipped. "What do you mean, who I am?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Silas sighed, running a hand over his face. The truth was a dangerous thing, but lies were becoming impossible. "Dante ran a check," Silas said quietly. "Caitlin Rossi, daughter of Lucian Rossi, the Don of the Philadelphia crime family." Caitlin took a step back, her face draining of color. She hit the counter and gripped it for support. "How do you know that? It's my job to know things." "You work for him," she accused, tears springing to her eyes. "Oh my God, he found me. After 10 years, he found me." "He didn't find you," Silas said, stepping closer, hands raised in surrender. "I did, and until yesterday, I didn't know you existed. Lucian thinks you are dead. Then why are you here to finish me off, to bring me back?" "I'm here because someone tried to blow me up," Silas said. "And your daughter saved me. That puts us on the same side. Caitlin, someone is trying to kill me. And if they find out I'm here, they'll kill you too. Not because of who your father is, but because you're a witness." Caitlin looked at him, searching for the lie. She saw the hardness in his face, but also the desperation. "Who are you to my father?" she asked. "I'm his right hand," Silas admitted. "I'm the guy he sends when he wants problems to disappear." Caitlin let out a shuddering breath. "So you're the monster he always wanted a son to be?" "Yes." She looked toward the kitchen where Lily was hiding. "If he knows about her." "He doesn't," Silas promised. "And as long as I'm breathing, he won't. I'm not here to take you to him. I'm here to keep you from him, and from everyone else." Before she could respond, Silas's phone buzzed. It was a text from Dante. "Silas, we have a problem. The license plate from the sedan last night. It's registered to a shell company owned by Arthur Penhaligon, the consigliere, and Silas. The GPS data shows the car is currently parked 2 blocks from the diner. They aren't just watching, they're staging." Silas looked up, his eyes locking onto the street outside. A delivery truck had just pulled up, blocking the view of the intersection. "Get Lily," Silas said, his voice changing from argumentative to command. "Get her now. We have to go." "What way?" "Because the people who blew up my car just found us, and they aren't street thugs. Caitlin, they're professionals." As if to punctuate his sentence, the front window of the diner shattered. A canister hissed across the floor, spinning and spewing white smoke. Tear gas. "Move!" Silas roared, vaulting the counter and grabbing Caitlin. He shoved her toward the kitchen. "Get the girl out the back, now!" The war had come to the Greasy Spoon, and the Viper was cornered. The kitchen of the Greasy Spoon was a chaotic maze of stainless steel and panicked shouting. Smoke from the tear gas canister in the dining room was beginning to curl under the doorframe. Stinging eyes and throats. "Mommy!" Lily screamed, coughing as she dropped her coloring book and scrambled off the milk crate she'd been sitting on. Silas burst through the swinging doors, practically carrying Caitlin. He didn't stop. He scooped Lily up in his free arm, her small body rigid with fear, and kicked the back exit door open. "Don't look back," Silas commanded, his voice a low growl. "Run to the alley. Go left." They spilled out into the damp, garbage-strewn alleyway, just as the front window of the diner blew inward with a sickening crunch. Men were shouting inside. Heavy boots crunched on glass. "They're coming through the front," Silas assessed, scanning the rooftops. "We have 30 seconds." Caitlin was hyperventilating, clutching her apron. "My car! I don't have a car!" "We're not taking a car," Silas said. "We're taking the subway." It's the only way to lose a tail in this gridlock. He grabbed Caitlin's hand, his grip like iron, and pulled them down the alley, away from the main street where the black sedan and the delivery truck were waiting. They wove through the labyrinth of brick and chain-link fences, Silas moving with a terrifying familiarity. He knew every shortcut, every loose fence panel in South Philly. They burst out onto a side street, 3 blocks away from the diner. The sirens were already wailing in the distance, closing in on the restaurant. "Down here," Silas said, shoving them toward the subway entrance. They descended into the gloom of the broad street line. Silas vaulted the turnstile, lifting Lily over, and pulled Caitlin through the emergency gate just as a train rumbled into the station. It was a silver bullet of noise and grime. They scrambled onto the last car. The doors hissed shut a split second later. Silas didn't sit. He stood by the door, watching the platform through the scratched plexiglass as the train pulled away. 2 men in dark suits burst onto the platform, scanning the crowd, but they were too late. The train accelerated, swallowing them into the darkness of the tunnel. Only then did Silas exhale. He looked at his charges. Caitlin was slumped on a plastic seat, holding Lily, who was sobbing quietly into her chest. "We're safe for now," Silas said, though he knew it was a lie. "Safe?" Caitlin looked up, her eyes red from the gas and fury. "You call this safe? You just blew up my workplace. You destroyed the only life I had." "I saved your life," Silas countered, his voice hard. "Those men were there to kill you. Caitlin, not rob you. Kill you." "Why?" she cried. "Because of who my father is. Because you're a loose end," Silas said. "And because Arthur Penhaligon is cleaning house." "Arthur," Caitlin frowned, a memory surfacing. "Uncle Arthur. He used to give me peppermint candies when I was little. He read me stories." "Arthur is a snake in a wool suit," Silas spat. "He's the consigliere, and apparently he's decided it's time for a change in management." The train screeched to a halt at the Walnut Locust stop. "We get off here," Silas said. "Where are we going?" "To the one place they won't look, the lion's den." 30 minutes later, they were standing in the freight elevator of a high-rise building in Center City. But not just any building. This was the Rossi Syndicate's legitimate front, Rossi Imports and Exports. "Are you insane?" Caitlin hissed as the elevator climbed. "This is my father's building." "Exactly," Silas said, checking the magazine of his pistol. "Arthur thinks I'm dead or running. He thinks you're a helpless waitress. He won't expect us to walk right into the heart of the operation. My father will be there." "No," Silas said. "Lucian is at the hospital for his dialysis. Tuesdays and Thursdays. The penthouse is empty, and it has the best security in the city." The elevator dinged. The doors opened directly into a sprawling penthouse apartment that smelled of leather, mahogany, and old money. It was silent. Silas ushered them in and locked the elevator with a key card. "Stay away from the windows," he ordered. "Don't touch the phones." Caitlin walked into the room, looking around with a mixture of awe and revulsion. This was the world she had run from. The opulence was suffocating. "I remember this smell," she whispered. "Cigars and guilt." Lily, however, was enchanted. She wandered over to a massive aquarium filled with exotic fish. "Look, Mommy, a shark." "It's a nurse shark," Silas said, his voice softening slightly as he looked at the girl. "Harmless unless you poke it." "Like you?" Lily asked, turning her big hazel eyes on him. Silas paused. "No, I'm the other kind. He went to the massive oak desk in the corner and booted up the computer. He needed access to the internal servers. If Arthur was making a move, there would be a paper trail: money transfers, orders, communication logs. Arthur was meticulous, which made him predictable. "What are you doing?" Caitlin asked, coming to stand behind him. "Following the money," Silas muttered, typing rapidly. "Arthur isn't doing this alone. He needs muscle. Caitlin Reed was just the trigger man. I need to know who's funding the coup." He bypassed the firewalls with codes only he and Lucian knew. He accessed the miscellaneous accounts ledger. There it was, a series of transfers, authorized 3 days ago. $5 million moved to an offshore account in the Caymans. The account holder, Caitlin Reed. But the authorization code that was the kicker. It wasn't Arthur's code. It was Santino's. Silas sat back, the blood draining from his face. "It's not just Arthur." "What?" Caitlin asked. "Your brother," Silas said, looking at her. "Santino. He's working with Arthur. They're trying to push your father out. And they tried to kill me because I'm the only one loyal enough to stop them." Caitlin's hand went to her mouth. "Santino. He's reckless, but he wouldn't kill Dad." "Maybe not," Silas said, "but he'd kill me, and he'd definitely kill you if he knew you were back. You're the older sibling, Caitlin. In the old laws, you have a claim. I don't want it." "It doesn't matter what you want," Silas said, standing up. "It matters what you represent." Suddenly, the elevator chimed. Silas spun around, gun raised. He hadn't called the elevator, and he had locked it. Someone had the master override. "Get behind the desk," Silas roared, flipping the heavy oak table on its side to create a barricade. "Now." Caitlin grabbed Lily and dove behind the thick wood. Silas crouched beside them, his eyes fixed on the steel doors. The doors slid open. But it wasn't a hit squad. It was an old man in a wheelchair, pushing himself forward with trembling hands. He wore a silk robe and had an oxygen tube in his nose. It was Lucian Rossi, and standing behind him, with a gun pressed to the old man's head, was Arthur Penhaligon. "Put the gun down, Silas," Arthur said smoothly. His voice was like dry leaves scraping together. He looked every bit the kindly grandfather Caitlin remembered, except for the 9mm Beretta in his manicured hand. "Or the Don dies right here in his foyer." Silas didn't lower his weapon. "You're going to kill him anyway, Arthur. Why wait?" "I'd prefer not to," Arthur sighed. "Lucian and I have been friends for 40 years, but he's grown soft. He let you run things. He let the families lose respect for us. It's time for new blood." "Santino," Silas guessed. "Santino is pliable," Arthur corrected. "He has the name, but I have the brain. It will be a perfect partnership." Lucian coughed, a wet, rattling sound. He looked up, his eyes milky but still sharp. He saw Silas. Then he looked past the barricade and saw Caitlin. His breath hitched. "Caitlin." Caitlin slowly stood up, ignoring Silas's hissed warning. "Hello, Daddy." The old man's face crumbled. "My God. You're alive." "Touching," Arthur drawled. "A family reunion. It's a shame it has to be awake." Arthur's eyes flicked to the side. "Come on out. Santino, your sister is dying to see you." From the shadows of the hallway behind the elevator, Santino Rossi stepped out. He was younger than Silas, handsome in a flashy way, but his eyes were darting nervously. He held a submachine gun, but he held it like a toy he was afraid of. "I didn't want this. Cat," Santino said, his voice cracking. "I just wanted what was mine. Dad was never going to give it to me. He always loved you more, even when you were gone. So you kill him." Caitlin stepped out from behind the desk, her anger overriding her fear. "You kill his best man. You kill me." "You weren't supposed to be here," Santino shouted. "You were supposed to stay dead." "Enough!" Arthur snapped. "Santino, finish it. Kill Vane. I'll handle the girl." Santino raised the gun toward Silas. Silas calculated the odds. He could take Santino, but Arthur would shoot Lucian or Caitlin before Silas could re-aim. It was a stalemate, and he was losing. Then, a small voice piped up from behind the desk. "Hey, you!" Arthur looked down. Lily popped up, holding her tactical flashlight. "What is this?" Arthur sneered. "The ticking," Lily said loudly. "It's not under the car anymore." Arthur frowned. "What?" "It's in your pocket," she said, pointing the flashlight beam directly into Arthur's eyes. Arthur flinched, blinded for a split second by the military-grade strobe. He instinctively raised a hand to shield his eyes. That split second was all Silas needed. Bang! Silas's shot took Arthur in the shoulder, spinning him around. The gun flew from his hand. "Santino! Down!" Silas roared, rushing forward. Santino panicked. He sprayed bullets wildly into the ceiling, terrified. Silas tackled him, driving him into the expensive Persian rug. He knocked the gun away and delivered a swift, brutal punch to Santino's jaw. The boy went limp. Silas rolled, bringing his gun up to finish Arthur. But Arthur was already down. Lucian Rossi, the man in the wheelchair, had pulled a small revolver from the pocket of his robe, a holdout piece he'd carried since 1975, and shot his treacherous consigliere in the kneecap. Arthur was screaming, clutching his shattered leg. Silas stood up, breathing hard. The room was silent except for Arthur's moans and the bubbling of the fish tank. He looked at Lily. She was still holding the flashlight, trembling. "Nice aim, kid," Silas breathed. Caitlin ran to Lily, scooping her up. Then she looked at her father. Lucian wheeled himself over to them. He looked at Caitlin, then at the little girl in her arms. "She looks like you," Lucian whispered, tears spilling onto his cheeks. "When you were that age." "Her name is Lily," Caitlin said, her voice hard but breaking. "And she's the only reason you're alive right now." Lucian looked at Silas. You knew she was alive." "I found out yesterday," Silas said, holstering his gun. "I was protecting them from your son and your best friend." Lucian looked at Santino, unconscious on the floor, and Arthur, bleeding out. The betrayal etched lines into his face deeper than age ever could. "Take them away," Lucian croaked to the empty room. "Silas, call the cleaners. Call the police for Arthur. Tell them it was a break-in. And Santino." Silas asked. Lucian closed his eyes. "He is no son of mine. Send him to the farmhouse. He stays there until I decide what to do with him." Silas nodded. He pulled out his phone. "And Silas," Lucian said. "Yes, boss." "You're out." Silas froze. "Sir." "You're done," Lucian said, looking at his daughter and granddaughter. "I see the way you look at them. You can't be a viper and a guardian dog at the same time. You have to choose, and I think you already made your choice when you didn't tell me about them." Silas looked at Caitlin. She was watching him, waiting. "I can't just leave," Silas said. "I know too much." "You know nothing," Lucian said firmly. "Silas Vane died in a car explosion yesterday. Whoever you are now, that's up to you." The old Don wheeled himself toward his bedroom. Now get out of my house before I change my mind. 3 months later. The coastal town of Cape May, New Jersey, was quiet in the off-season. The wind whipped off the Atlantic, cold and salty, rattling the windows of a small, renovated cottage near the beach. Silas, who now went by the name Jack, sat on the porch, watching the waves crash against the sand. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans. His hands were calloused, not from holding a gun, but from sanding wood. He was fixing up the deck. The door opened behind him. Caitlin stepped out, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You're going to freeze out here," she said, handing him one. "I like the cold," Silas said, taking a sip. "It reminds me I'm alive. How's the deck coming?" "Slowly. I'm better at breaking things than fixing them." "You're learning," she smiled. She sat on the railing next to him. "Lily is asking if you'll take her to the lighthouse later. She wants to see if there are ghosts." "There are no ghosts," Silas said. "We left them all in Philly." "Did we?" Caitlin asked softly. "Do you miss it? The power, the fear?" Silas looked at her. He thought about the adrenaline, the suits, the nights where he felt like a god. Then he thought about the fear in Lily's eyes that first night. He thought about the quiet mornings here, the sound of the ocean, the way Caitlin smiled when he made breakfast without burning it. He reached out and took her hand. "I was a ghost for 10 years. Caitlin," he said, "I'm finally real." Just then, the screen door banged open. Lily ran out, wearing a bright yellow raincoat, a new one, the right size this time. "Jack, Jack," she yelled. "Come on, the tide is going out. We have to find crabs." Silas Vane, the former Viper of Philadelphia, the man who made grown men wet themselves in terror, stood up. He groaned mockingly at his stiff knees. All right, I'm coming," he said. He walked down the steps, hand in hand with the little girl who had saved his life with a whisper. As they walked toward the beach, Caitlin watched them. She saw the man who had been a monster, and she saw the father he was becoming. She pulled her phone out. One new message from an unknown number. "Enjoy the view. The city is quiet." Caitlin smiled and deleted the message. She put the phone away and ran down the sand to join them. The ticking had stopped. And for the first time in a long time, the only sound was the heartbeat of a life worth living. And that is the story of how a ruthless Mafia enforcer found his heart in the hands of a 6-year-old girl. Silas Vane thought he was invincible. But it took a child's innocence to show him that true strength isn't about how many people you can scare, it's about who you're willing to protect. He walked away from an empire to build a castle in the sand, proving that even monsters can be redeemed if they're willing to step into the light.